Hey guys, tonight we drift backward, way back to a time when the map still had dragons scribbled in the margins and people thought sea monsters were more plausible than California. You find yourself rocking gently on the deck of a Portuguese carrack sails, puffed like bloated lungs above you, ropes creaking overhead, and the smell of salt sweat and questionable fish stew hanging thick in the air. The year is 1498. You're exhausted, sunburnt, and deeply suspicious of anything that doesn't involve dry land and a bath. Ahead, India, behind the long, hungry curve of the African coast. Around you, sailors with hair like seaweed and tempers shorter than a monsoon season. And in the captain's quarters, a man obsessed with spice. Not cinnamon, not cloves, though they'll do in a pinch, but black pepper. The black gold of the age, the reason Europe emptied its pockets and built ships big enough to look smug in any port. You're on Vasco da Gama's ship. Congratulations. You probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're still awake, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where in the world you're nodding off from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step off the boat in Calicut, southern India, and it's chaos. Vendors shouting, children darting between palm-woven stalls. The sharp scent of turmeric, coriander, and something else, something sharp, almost citrusy, that stings your nose like a warning. You pause beside a spice merchant's basket filled with tiny red pods. He gestures enthusiastically and says something you don't quite catch, but it sounds promising. Da Gama's interpreter mutters, he says it's gold, in flavor. You nod confused, because this isn't gold. It's a chili. But here's the twist in this moment, no one knows that. See, Europeans have only just begun mapping this corner of the world. The Ottomans choke land routes to the east, so Portugal is betting its whole maritime future on finding pepper islands, places dripping with precious black pepper, the stuff that makes roast meats bearable and nobles feel fancy. Chili, in comparison, a wild card. It doesn't look like gold, doesn't behave like gold, and certainly doesn't taste like it. But when Da Gama's sailors first bite into one, something hilarious happens. They sweat, they choke, they flail like someone's lit a match in their throats. One man reportedly tries to rinse his mouth with seawater and regrets it instantly. Another prays loudly. And yet, after they stop coughing, someone says, we must have found the strongest spice in the East. You standing nearby politely decline your sample. Wise. Mainstream fact, Portuguese traders were among the first Europeans to encounter chili peppers in India, mistaking their intense heat for an indication of rarity and value. Possibly even assuming they were a variant of black pepper or related to long pepper, which had already trickled into Europe from earlier trade. Fringe tidbit. There's a semi-apocryphal story that one noble in Lisbon, upon tasting a dried chili sent back by Da Gama, demanded it be stored in the royal treasury. Lock it with the emeralds, he supposedly said. It burns like fire from the earth. Historians still argue whether this statement was literal or part of a sarcastic dispatch written by a very overwhelmed kitchen staff. But for now, here in Calicut, the mistake is sincere. Your shipmates collect sacks of chilies. They haggle. They fill the hold with them next to black pepper cloves and a few ill-advised chickens. You're told to help record inventory. It reads something like this: 12 sacks pepper, 7 crates cinnamon, 3 chests cardamom, 6 sacks red fire pods value debated, 1 goat traded for boots. You don't question it. At night, as you sit near the firelight in a courtyard shaded by banyan trees, one of the sailors tries grinding chili into his stew. He uses too much. He screams. A dog runs off. You stare at the glowing ember of a pod in your hand and wonder, how did this thing get mistaken for treasure? The answer, of course, is desperation. Portugal isn't looking for flavor. It's looking for trade leverage, for a monopoly, for anything that will make it rich without going through Venice or Cairo. And when the chilies sting the tongue like they do, some minds decide this has to be valuable. After all, who would willingly eat something that makes their eyes leak unless it did something extraordinary? Of course, you now know chili isn't gold, but it is a revolution. One that will blaze through cuisines, through cultures, through centuries, and tonight you're going to watch it burn. The heat still lingers on your tongue as you drift back toward the harbor. Your breath fogs slightly in the damp night air, though it isn't cold, just thick, with the kind of humidity that makes shirts cling and tempers itch. Behind you, the spice market buzzes with lantern glow and last-minute trades, but your mind is still fixated on that infernal little pod. How did something so small cause such confusion? The Portuguese obsession with spice wasn't new. You've heard it muttered across the ship in half a dozen dialects. He who controls the spice controls the crown. That might sound like fantasy now, but in the 15th century, pepper was quite literally worth its weight in silver. People wrote wills that specified how much black pepper to leave to their heirs. Entire fortunes were gambled, sometimes lost, over the promise of one more shipload of the stuff. And now here comes chili. Unassuming, not black, not even familiar, and yet somehow spicier, stronger, stranger. It's like discovering gold that shouts. You're seated on the dock railings beside a young sailor named João. He's staring blankly at the horizon, nursing a bowl of something that smells like regret and roasted onions. That thing he mutters between sips, "It bit me." You nod sagely. He doesn't elaborate. Mainstream historical fact, chili peppers are native to Central and South America. But through a perfect storm of maritime routes, cultural curiosity, and colonial ambition, they began traveling almost immediately after the Columbian Exchange kicked off. The Portuguese, being excellent at sailing and even better at global intrusion, spread them from the Americas into Africa, India, and parts of Southeast Asia within just a few decades. The chili, in other words, didn't take long to go global. Fringe tidbit, some records suggest that early Portuguese sailors believed chili had cleansing properties, not just culinary value. One account from a ship's log in 1501 claimed that rubbing crushed chili into wounds kept the devil from settling in the blood. Historians still argue whether that was sincere medical theory or the frantic logic of a man with poor hygiene and fewer options. Back in Calicut, the mistake grows legs. Chili is cheap, but it burns. Therefore, sailors reason maybe it's rare. Maybe the locals don't realize how valuable it is. You watch as a sailor named Thomas tries to trade a bronze cup for a small pouch of dried pods. The merchant blinks confused, then shrugs and agrees. Tomas beams as if he's just robbed a dragon. This is the beginning of what will become, in later centuries, a tragicomic theme, Europeans wildly overestimating their understanding of local goods and trading like tipsy raccoons at a buffet. By now, word spreads on the ship the fire fruit is going home. It's labeled boxed, annotated, with grandiose flair, Piper rubrum ignes, red pepper of fire. One scholar even suggests it might be alchemical. You roll your eyes, but you still write it in the logbook. The voyage back is predictably awful. A storm rips 3 sails, a barrel of vinegar breaks and ruins half the flour, and someone's monkey keeps escaping and sleeping in the hammock meant for the cook. You chew on dried bread and dried fish and dream of literally any other flavor. Then someone crushes a chili and sprinkles it on the fish. It changes everything. It's not perfect. It still smells like bilge, but it burns in a way that drowns the rest out. Suddenly, mealtime isn't just endurable, it's anticipated. That you realize might be chili's most powerful magic. It doesn't just add heat, it adds hope. Back in Lisbon, the unloading ceremony is predictably pompous. Nobles gather, scribes lean over ledgers, church officials peer suspiciously at every barrel as if it might contain Protestantism. Then the chili crates come out. One noblewoman sneezes violently. A court chef pokes a pod, then tastes it, then weeps. Someone claims to feel divine clarity. Another tries to bathe their tongue in milk. You stand back and observe the scene unfold like a biblical parable in miniature. A red fruit, temptation, fire, tears, enlightenment, confusion. Portugal unknowingly has just welcomed the chili into Europe. Historians still argue whether the early crates were mixed with American peppers, brought via other routes, some through North Africa, others directly from Brazil or the Caribbean. It's entirely possible that several varieties were circulating at once, mislabeled and misattributed in a flurry of enthusiasm and ignorance. But what's certain is this: from this moment on, chili becomes part of the culinary conversation, not just in Portugal, but everywhere Portuguese ships touch. Africa, India, the coasts of China, the islands of Malaysia, the distant highlands of Java. You imagine little red pods tucked into pouches planted in courtyards, thrown into stews. Not gold, not jewels, but spice that shimmered on the tongue and stayed in the memory. And now, back in your cramped Lisbon lodging, you sit by a small hearth with a chipped clay bowl of lentils and salted meat. It's humble food, but in it a pinch of crushed chili. Your mouth burns, your eyes water, you smile, because even if it isn't treasure in the strictest sense, it's something worth sailing for. You wake to the rattle of wheels on cobbled stone and the unmistakable scent of spice. Familiar now, yet still commanding. The markets of Lisbon are bustling. You make your way through narrow lanes where oranges spill from crates and fishmongers shout over the squawk of gulls. But it's not fruit or seafood that people are whispering about today. It's that new red thing. They're calling it pimenta do reino, though it's not pepper in any traditional sense. Some still believe it's a form of long pepper. Others say it's a miracle from the Indies. A few say it's dangerous, that it heats the blood and awakens unholy appetites. You of course know, it's just a chili. But the people of Lisbon are divided between awe and caution. One apothecary has mixed it into a tonic meant to cure melancholy along with ground pearls and goat bile. Another has stitched dried pods into a sachet and sells it as a talisman to ward off envy. Nearby, a nobleman in saffron robes holds a pod aloft and declares, "This fruit burns like damnation and smells like ambition. I want it in everything." Mainstream historical fact. Early Portuguese records show a genuine fascination with chili, not only for culinary uses, but also as a potential medicinal tool. Some physicians believed it could warm cold temperaments, balance the humors, or drive away the plague. Its fiery nature made it suspect and sacred in equal measure. Fringe tidbit. A Portuguese cookbook from the early 1500s includes a marginal note next to a fish stew. Add red flame fruit only when clouds gather. If sun is strong, it brings misfortune. Historians still argue whether this referred to superstition, indigestion, or simply poor timing. You push through the crowd to the spice stalls. Here, nestled between mounds of saffron and peppercorns, is a small burlap sack marked with a crude drawing of a chili and a note. 2 escudos per dozen. Caution advised. The merchant offers you a dried one to chew. You shake your head. Fool you once, shame on you. Fool you twice, and you'll spend the day weeping into a wine jug. Still, you buy a pouch. Why? Because something's happening. Chilies aren't replacing pepper, not yet, but they're intriguing. Noble kitchens are experimenting. Street vendors are curious. Soldiers are stuffing them into their jerky. The chili is adapting, changing, bending to the Portuguese palate, even as it retains its sting. You hear stories in the Algarve a cook added chilies to a sausage mix and accidentally created something no one could stop eating. In Porto, a monk used them to mask the smell of questionable cheese. In Coimbra, a baker swore that one dried pod under the tongue made poetry easier. Even the crown takes notice. King Manuel receives a tray of exotic goods, nutmeg, cloves, cinnamon, and yes, a basket of brilliant red pods. He sniffs them, raises an eyebrow, and asks the royal taster to try one. The man obliges. Immediately, he turns purple. Then he bows and says, voice-shaking majesty, "This is not gold, but it is something close." Later, you're told that the king ordered chili plants grown in the palace gardens for decorative and moral purposes. You're still not sure what moral means in this context, but it sounds impressive. As weeks pass, you begin to notice a strange pattern. The chili's reputation spreads faster than the facts. It's being blamed or praised for everything. A woman claims it healed her arthritis. A baker insists it ruined his sourdough starter. A priest preaches that its heat mirrors the fires of hell. Meanwhile, children dare each other to bite raw pods behind the stables. You find one boy curled under a cart, hiccuping violently, his eyes as round as moons. "Worth it," he gasps. Back in the spice market, you watch as a new shipment is unloaded. Not from India this time, but from Brazil. These pods are rounder, shorter, some yellow, some green. The merchant calls them wild fire fruit. You raise a brow. Another name, another origin. but the same look in people's eyes: curiosity, caution, hunger. Historians still argue whether the Portuguese consciously knew they were spreading multiple varieties of chili from different hemispheres, or if they simply didn't care so long as it burned. What's clear is that by the early 16th century, chili was no longer a novelty. It was a phenomenon. And that's how you find yourself one sleepy afternoon in a tiny kitchen tucked behind a vineyard in Setúbal. The cook, an elderly woman named Lourdes, is grinding something in a stone bowl. You lean closer. It's red, fragrant, familiar. She looks up. "You've tasted this before," she says without question. You nod. She adds garlic, a splash of vinegar, olive oil, a pinch of salt. Then she hands you a spoon. You hesitate. She frowns. You taste. It's glorious, sharp, bright, deep. It hits your tongue like sunlight filtered through stained glass. Not painful, just present, like it's trying to tell you a secret through flavor. She smiles, then nods toward the bowl. We call it piri piri. My grandson thinks it keeps away ghosts. You take another bite. Maybe it does. You wake the next morning with the vague sensation that your mouth is still tingling. The piri piri sauce from Lourdes' vineyard still lingers in your memory, bright, vinegary, hot. You shuffle to the window. The vineyard stretched like green lace across the hills, dew glistening in the low dawn light. A rooster crows. Somewhere in the distance, a cart rattles by, piled high with baskets of produce, onions, beans, bread, and yes, a flash of crimson. Chilies. It's spreading faster than you expected. Soon you're hearing the word Malagueta everywhere. It's become the catch-all name for nearly every chili that reaches Portuguese soil, whether from Brazil, Goa, or Mozambique. Not entirely accurate, of course, but no one seems to care. Malagueta means little wicked one, and it fits. Mainstream historical fact: by the early 1500s, Portuguese trade routes stretched from Lisbon to Brazil, Angola, Mozambique, India, and even Japan. Along these routes, Malagueta chilies hitched rides, smuggled in pouches tucked into cloth sacks, and sometimes sewn into the hems of robes. In Goa, the local cooks at first eyed them with suspicion, then leaned into their potential with unapologetic intensity. You walk through a bustling Goan market, now transported by your dreamlike journey, where cinnamon and tamarind swirl in the air and brass pots catch the sun like coins. A vendor waves you over with stained fingers, holding up a mango pickle that smells like fire and fermented magic. You taste a sliver. Your ears ring. The cook laughs and slaps your back, shouting something in Konkani that you hope means brave foreigner and not mild idiot. The Portuguese didn't invent chili-laced cuisine in Goa, but they certainly amplified it. The fusion was irresistible, native Indian ingredients, local genius, and a new world burn. Vindaloo was born originally a garlic-laden pork stew from Portugal called carne de vinha d'alhos, slowly adapted to Indian spices, thickened with chilies, and reinterpreted again and again. And it doesn't stop there. Mozambique, enter frango piri piri, fiery grilled chicken that became both street food and Sunday feast. Angola chilies found their way into bean stews and fried fish, mingling with palm oil and smoked herbs. Brazil. The land of the chili riot. From Bahia to Sao Paulo, every region seemed to adopt the pepper like a long-lost cousin. Mulhouse pastes, rubs, it was all happening. Fringe tidbit: in Angola there are folk tales about spirits that are appeased by offerings of spicy food left at the edge of the forest. A bowl of chili-slicked cassava might ward off bad dreams or even attract good luck, depending on which ancestor you're trying to impress. Historians still argue whether the Portuguese intentionally used chili cultivation as a form of culinary colonialism, or if it was just a happy accident born of obsession and availability. What's clear is that the humble pepper transcended class, creed, and geography. It wasn't just for nobles anymore, it was everywhere. You ride along the coast of Mozambique, now salt wind in your face, the horizon split between white surf and scarlet sails. A local captain laughs as he eats dried shrimp mixed with chili and lime, his eyes watering, his grin unwavering. It wakes the heart, he says. Back in Lisbon, letters arrive from every corner of the empire. Your fiery seed has taken root, one friar writes from India. The brethren now refuse their gruel unless it is seasoned with what we have named the tongue's trial. Another reads, we have planted the red pod in every parish garden. May it burn brightly in God's name. You snort. It's a vegetable, not a sermon. But still, there's something poetic about it. You visit a monastery where monks are experimenting with spice cultivation. The garden is half herbal remedy, half apocalyptic chili forest. One monk, Brother Pasquale, warns you not to touch anything without gloves. You glance at a strange black pod the size of a baby's fist. He simply whispers, that one made me see colors that do not exist. Needless to say, you skip that one. Later, you find yourself at a roadside stall in Bahia, Brazil. A woman with henna-red braids and laughter in her voice serves you acarajé, deep-fried bean fritters stuffed with shrimp and a chili sauce that smells like fireworks. The flavor nearly knocks you off the bench. She cackles. You gringos never learn, but you always come back. And that's the thing, isn't it? You do come back, not just for the heat, but for the layers underneath. Chilies aren't a fad, they're a migration, a memory, a mutation. They've changed the world's palate not with force, but with fire and flavor. It's at this point in your journey that you realize something unsettling. The Portuguese didn't always know where their chilies came from, or even which ones were which. They mislabeled capsicum species, lumped varieties together, and confused origin stories. But in doing so, they also blurred boundaries between continents, cultures, and cuisines. You walk through a stormy street in Lisbon one evening, candlelight flickering in a tavern window. Inside, you see a man spooning something red and oily over bread. The smell is unmistakable. You step in and take a seat. It's chili butter. Yes, that's a thing now. You try it, you weep quietly. Historians still argue whether this era marked the true start of fusion cuisine. But one thing is certain, if you follow the burn far enough, it leads everywhere, even to places you didn't expect, like the kitchens of Japan. Yes, Japan, but you'll get there soon enough. You're in Japan now. Sort of. You're actually in Nagasaki late afternoon, where the sea glimmers silver and the clouds hover like pressed rice cakes over the bay. The year is somewhere in the mid-1500s, and your feet are sore from walking in those paper-thin tabi slippers you didn't ask for. But your senses, oh, they're wide awake, because something smells spicy. Yes, spicy in Japan, and that's not supposed to be the case. Japan at this point isn't known for fiery food. This is a land of subtlety, of misodashi and quiet elegance. Heat is not traditional, but the Portuguese have arrived, and with them chilies. Mainstream historical fact: Portuguese traders called Nanbanjin, or Southern Barbarians, first arrived in Japan in 1543, shipwrecked on Tanegashima. They brought firearms, Christianity, and chili peppers. One of these would rewrite Japanese warfare. Another would cause a culinary ripple that still tastes faintly of mischief. You duck into a Jesuit mission house. The architecture is a blend of Japanese austerity and Iberian pomp. Tatami, floors, crucifixes on the walls, faint traces of incense and garlic in the air. A friar nods at you, his robe patched and stained with tomato. Or is that chili oil? In the back kitchen, a local cook is stirring something in a clay pot. It's pickled daikon and a sprinkle of dried red powder. You ask what it is. He shrugs. Nanbanko. Foreign spice. Fringe tidbit. The Japanese word for chili pepper togarashi literally means Chinese mustard. That's right. Despite the Portuguese origin, the peppers were assumed to come from China because, well, global geography was still very much a choose-your-own-adventure back then. Historians still argue whether the Portuguese intentionally seeded chilies in Japan to curry favor, no pun intended, with powerful warlords, or whether it was just a consequence of enthusiastic cooks and Jesuits looking to survive long winters with more than fish and fermented soybeans. Either way, the effect was slow but lasting. You sit down to eat. There's pickled plum, a bowl of rice, a single grilled fish, and a thin miso soup dusted just barely with crushed chili. It hits the back of your throat like a spark, not painful, not overwhelming, just a polite hello. In the following decades, chili doesn't dominate Japanese food, but it leaves fingerprints. Spice becomes associated with foreignness, with daring. It shows up in soba noodle broths, in dipping sauces, in preserved tsukemono vegetables, and eventually it becomes ceremonial. You wander through a temple where pilgrims are offered shichimi togarashi, a 7-spice blend with dried pepper flakes as one key element. The monks offer it to you in tiny paper packets. You open one and breathe in. Citrus peel, sesame, nori, and heat. It smells like a geography lesson in powder form. One monk taps your shoulder. It balances the senses, he says. A warm mouth protects the spirit. You nod as if that makes perfect sense, which in that moment it does. Elsewhere in Japan, enterprising street cooks begin experimenting. You stumble across a vendor in Kyoto grilling small skewers of chicken brushed with a sweet salty sauce and a dusting of fire. His cart is makeshift. His smile is permanent. He offers you a skewer and raises his eyebrows. Western tongue, you nod, then double spice. You regret this immediately, but you also go back for seconds. Later that night, curled under a paper-thin blanket in a guest house, lit by flickering lanterns, you scribble notes about how something as small as a chili pepper can jump from continent to continent, hiding in pickles and prayer books and fried snacks until it becomes untraceable. Not a visitor anymore, but a local. In Nagasaki, some recipes even call for fermented chili paste in seafood stews. A sailor tells you it reminds him of home, though he can't quite remember where that is anymore. Once you taste enough ports, he says they start to blur together, but I know this burn. The missionaries weren't always pleased. They'd hoped to convert with theology, not tongue-tingling side dishes. But food as ever had its own agenda. You attend a sermon in a small wooden church where the air smells of wax and roasted squash. The friar preaches about temptation and humility. Afterward, he sneaks a bite of chili-cured daikon and winks at you. Some rebellions are deliciously quiet. By the late 1500s, Japan begins tightening its borders. Foreigners are expelled. Christianity is banned. The Portuguese vanish from official history like smudged ink, but the flavors linger in households, in vendors' stalls, in the trembling hush of spice that waits at the bottom of a bowl. You leave Japan with a full stomach and a mind racing. If chilies could cross oceans, survive inquisitions, and sneak into temples, what else could they do? As you drift to sleep on your imaginary return boat, rocked gently by the waves, nose still tingling from powdered fire, you wonder what continent they'll set ablaze next. And you already know the answer. It starts with an O, and it ends with ops. We made everything spicy. You stumble ashore in Goa now, brushing salt from your sleeves, squinting under the blinding white sun as the scent of peppercorns and cardamom rushes up from the market square like an ambush. It's hot, it's loud, and it smells like 10 different arguments happening over a pot of stew. Portuguese Goa in the early 1600s is not a subtle place. The cobbled streets are packed. Catholic cathedrals stand shoulder to shoulder with Hindu temples, and everyone is trading something cloth, copper, rice, nutmeg, and increasingly chilies. You blink, because here, finally, you see them sold openly in burlap sacks, bright red and devilishly cheerful, like someone spilled an ink pot across the spice stalls. Mainstream historical fact. After establishing their colonial capital in Goa in 1510, the Portuguese used the port as a central hub in their Indian Ocean spice empire. While their original obsession was black pepper, they began cultivating chilies almost immediately. Why simple chilies were cheaper, grew faster, and packed a punch that could fool the taste buds of anyone pining for true pepper. You wander through the Rua dos Mercadores Merchant Street, where chilies are now being called piri-piri in Portuguese and mirch by locals. A woman sells small dried pods from a flat basket. Good for stomach, she says, bad for liars. You're not sure what that means, but you buy a handful. Fringe tidbit. The term piri-piri likely came from the Swahili-speaking traders down the coast in Mozambique, where the Portuguese first tried cultivating the plants they'd brought from the New World. So, yes, these fiery little devils made 2 ocean crossings before they ever reached your curry. Historians still argue whether it was Goan cooks or Jesuit friars who first invented the iconic vindaloo, a dish originally based on the Portuguese carne de vinha, dalhos, meat marinated in wine and garlic. The Indian version added vinegar, spices, and, of course, chilies. The result was a culinary hand grenade wrapped in aromatic delight. You try a bite in a small tavern tucked behind a church courtyard. It starts soft, rich, complex, then bam. Your lips burn. Your scalp tingles, your eyes water politely, as if apologizing for your tongue's rebellion. The cook nods approvingly. "That's a Tuesday-level vindaloo," she says. "We serve Saturday strength to enemies." Goan cuisine quickly becomes a dance between heat and heritage. Catholic households tuck chili-based pickles next to rosaries. Hindu kitchens experiment with coconut chili stews that blur the line between divine offering and taste bud trial. Even the fishermen get in on it, packing sun-dried red chilies into their nets to ward off bad winds and, more likely, to flavor their evening catch. You watch as children pound chilies with stone mortars, red powder sticking to their elbows and foreheads like war paint. The air is thick with spice and laughter. At the same time, there's tension. Not everyone is thrilled about the chili spread. Some Brahmin priests declare it impure and invasive New World element that disrupts traditional Ayurvedic balances. A few temples even ban it from ritual meals, but secretly many still eat it at home. You peek into a courtyard where a woman is drying chili pods on a white cloth. She glances up. "This is not for food," she says. "It is for protection." Then she winks. In this world, chilies are medicine weapon ritual prank. One Portuguese officer tries to impress local dignitaries by eating an entire pod raw. He makes it halfway through, then jumps into a pond. The fish scatter. He's remembered as Captain Pepper, and children sing songs about his mouth made of fire and foolishness. Another story, unconfirmed of course, tells of a friar who painted tiny crosses on each chili pod before planting, just to ensure God's blessing or protection from infernal afterburn. You visit a small printing press where the first Catholic catechisms are being translated into Konkani. Between the rows of drying pages, you see chili threads strung up like Christmas garlands. The typesetter shrugs. They keep rats away. By now, chilies aren't just accepted in Goa, they're prized. They've muscled into the heart of every kitchen, every cough remedy, every argument over which grandmother makes the best shrimp balshao. You eat versions that are sweet, versions that are sour, versions that might be crimes in 3 countries. And you love them all. One night, under a tiled veranda, you meet a group of poets arguing about chili metaphors. One insists the perfect chili is like a broken promise, sharp, unforgettable. Another calls it a kiss from an ex. The oldest poet just shakes his head and says chili is not metaphor. Chili is mood. You scribble that one down. As Portuguese ships come and go sails, white as church linen hulls, heavy with nutmeg and cloves. Their hold always includes sacks of chili seeds. Goa becomes a seed bank of flavor, a spicy relay point for plants that will journey inland through the subcontinent or outward again to Southeast Asia and Africa. You sleep in a hammock strung between 2 palm trees, belly full of rice, heart full of flame, and mind spinning with the idea that something this small, this fiery, could be both colonized and colonizer. You dream of a world wrapped in heat, and when you wake, it's time to follow the trail to a place even hotter. You wipe the sweat from your brow with a sleeve already soaked in it, fanning yourself with a straw hat that gave up hours ago. Welcome to the Deccan Plateau. Dry, cracked earth crunches underfoot. The horizon ripples with heat like the air itself is trying to escape. And yet somehow the chilies are thriving. Here in central India, something unexpected is happening. A plant born in Mesoamerica, carted across oceans by confused conquerors, has found not just a home, but an empire. The Mughal Empire, to be precise. By the mid-1600s, the Mughals are at the height of their power. Their courts glitter with silk and sapphires. Their palaces make European castles look like barn sheds. And their chefs, well, their chefs have become legends. Mainstream historical fact, Mughal cuisine is a rich fusion of Central Asian, Persian, and Indian traditions. Dishes are elaborate, perfumed with saffron and rose water, thick with almonds and cream. Yet somewhere in those royal kitchens, a new player enters the scene, the chili. Not immediately, not loudly, but definitely and permanently. You wander into one such kitchen, or as close as a nosy time traveler can get without being pelted with ghee. The scale of the place is absurd. There are more cooks here than you've seen in your entire hometown. Enormous cauldrons bubble over wood fires. A team of 6 is dedicated just to peeling garlic. Another squad fans flames to keep skewers rotating evenly. Over it all hangs the heavy perfume of roasting spices and a rising note of heat. It's not the black pepper, it's something sharper, fringe tidbit. While black pepper remained prized for its status and subtlety, the chili offered something new drama. Unlike pepper, which whispers politely, the chili kicks in the door and demands attention. And let's be honest, no royal banquet is complete without a bit of spectacle. Enter the lal merch. You peek at a dish labeled Zarda Murg. Saffron rice with sweetened chicken and, yes, slivers of chili tucked in like crimson confetti. A court poet might have written a verse about it. Probably did. Something about ruby flames in moonlit rice. Historians still argue whether chilies were first embraced by royal chefs experimenting with novelty or by soldiers craving stronger flavors after dusty marches. Either way, by the time Aurangzeb takes the throne, chilies are everywhere from palace to barracks. And while the Mughals never fully abandoned their Persian spice traditions, the chili changes the equation. It's more than heat, it's texture, color, complexity. It turns a sweet dish mischievous, a bland dish bold. Even in mango pickles, it makes its way like a secret rebel. You stop in a market outside the fort of Golconda. A woman sells bundles of fresh green chilies, threaded like beads, for kitchen, she says, or mother-in-law's mouth. You laugh until she doesn't. The Deccan becomes a chili hotspot in every sense. The soil is dry, the sun is cruel, but the plants flourish. Soon regions like Andhra and Telangana are exporting dried red chilies by the ton. Varieties emerge, Guntur, Biadji, Kashmiri, each with its own flavor profile, each fighting for supremacy in the mouths of millions. And you can't escape them. Every meal is now a gamble. A lentil stew that looks mild makes your vision blur. A flatbread with chili paste folded inside feels like betrayal by carbs. Even desserts aren't safe. Someone offers you candied chili peel dipped in jaggery. It's delicious. It's terrifying. But more than that, it's contagious. Soon chilies spread beyond the palace, and army trickling down to street vendors, rural kitchens, and roadside dabas. They become part of the oral tradition passed down, not in books, but in a pinch here, a handful there, wisdom. A grandmother shows you how to sun-dry chilies on her rooftop, warning not to touch your eyes after. Her grandson already learned the hard way. You nod, watching the scarlet pods curl in the heat like sleeping dragons. And then one evening you visit a village during festival time. The smell hits you first, oil fire and something deeply inviting. At the center of it all, a communal pot of mirchi bhaji chilies stuffed with spiced lentils dipped in chickpea flour and deep fried. The line is long, the excitement is real. You take a bite. For a moment, nothing happens. Then, your soul tries to leave your body through your nose. Children cheer. Someone claps you on the back. The woman running the stall says, "That's not even the hot one." You nod, tears streaming, heart racing, a smile breaking through the pain. Because in that moment you get it. The chili isn't just food. It's performance. It's identity. It's the warmth of tradition and the shock of something new. It is somehow exactly what this place needed, a reminder that transformation can start small and burn its way into history. As night falls over the plateau, you sit near a low fire nursing a bowl of yogurt to calm your ravaged mouth and thinking about how something that wasn't even here 100 years ago is now in every field, every meal, every story. And tomorrow, you'll follow it north, into deserts, dynasties, and debates hotter than any tongue can bear. The wind changes as you head north, less humid, more impatient. It kicks up dust devils in the roadside fields and lifts the ends of cotton scarves. Your sandals crunch over dry earth as you approach the edge of Rajasthan, where the landscape shifts from lush plateaus to the thirsty breath of the Thar Desert. And still there are chilies. Oh, there are chilies. They hang in bunches from rooftops like scarlet prayer flags. They're woven into garlands tucked into storage baskets sold by the sackful in markets that smell like ash and sunlight. And here, in this unforgiving climate, they find yet another identity. You step into a desert kitchen, not much more than a lean-to made of cow dung and clay, and watch as a woman prepares la'al mas, literally red meat. But this is no gentle stew. This is chili theology, a goat curry born of fire, endurance, and pride. Mainstream historical fact: Rajasthan, a land of warriors and extremes, developed its famously spicy cuisine partly out of necessity. Scarcity of water and green vegetables meant they relied on dried ingredients, ghee, and long-lasting spices like chili to preserve and flavor food in a harsh environment. She stirs with a wooden paddle, the scent rising like incense, smoky, earthy, slightly sinister. The chilies, plenty of them, are first dried, then soaked, then ground into a paste so red it could stain memory itself. You ask how many chilies she uses, she just laughs. Chili here is not just heat. It's armor. In a land where survival is an art food, must be bold enough to match the people. These are the flavors of siege kitchens, of camel caravans, of rulers who dined in tents beneath starlit dunes. And in those tents, feasts were served not just to nourish, but to declare. Even the spice level was a power move. Fringe tidbit: one 18th century Rajput prince supposedly hosted a banquet where every dish was judged by how many tears it could draw. The cook who made the six-cry curry was awarded an elephant. The man who cried first banished for weakness. Historians still argue whether these tales are exaggeration or if Chile truly became a stand-in for valor in certain princely courts. But even today, in desert weddings and folk songs, there's a thread of Chile-induced bravado. You visit a small town during a local fair. There's a contest underway, not wrestling, not archery. No, this is a chili eating contest. A lineup of determined men's sleeves, rolled brows, furrowed eyes, locked on the enemy. A steel tray of stuffed red chilies. The crowd chants. Someone offers you a seat. Someone else offers you a chili. You decline, politely, bravely. You're learning. But the deeper lesson unfolds as you speak with a spice trader in Jodhpur. He's old, cheerful, and sunburned. His fingers are stained deep red as if the chili itself flows in his veins. He explains how different regions prefer different heat. Guntur chilies for pungency, Biadji for color, and the elusive Mathania red, a local legend. He opens a pouch and lets you inhale. It smells like danger wrapped in silk. These are for the royal kitchens, he says, or for people with something to prove. He laughs, but there's pride there. And it's not just about selling spice, it's about legacy. His grandfather sold chilies. His great-grandfather did too. Their stories are written not in ink but in flavor. And that flavor you begin to see isn't just passed down, it's traded. Because here's the spicy secret: India wasn't just consuming chilies, it was exporting them. By the 17th and 18th centuries, Indian chilies were making their way to Southeast Asia, the Middle East, even back to Europe, albeit as a more affordable, locally adapted alternative to the New World varieties. This twist of trade of colonized lands becoming spice exporters adds yet another layer to the tangled colonial plate. You sip a glass of buttermilk under a neem tree, wiping sweat from your forehead, and watch a farmer carry bundles of chilies to dry in the sun. They spread across the earth like dragon scales, crisping in the heat, curling like parchment. Each one a vessel of heat, history, and resistance. Because now the chili is no longer a visitor. It's part of the story. It's in lullabies and funeral meals, in festival feasts and monsoon snacks. It's what grandmothers warn you about and what cousins dare you to eat. It's memory, family, and sometimes revenge, all wrapped in one little crimson pod. And as you walk through the evening haze toward a temple where someone has left a garland of chilies and limes to ward off evil, you smile. Because in a land that has endured conquest, colonization, drought, and diaspora, the chili hasn't just survived, it has thrived. It has burned its way into rituals, relationships, and regional pride. So you bite into a fritter mirchi vada stuffed with spiced potatoes and deep fried into crispy defiance, and accept the tears with grace. They are, after all, part of the tradition. You wake before dawn, not because of the light, but because of the smell. It seeps through the wooden shutters, creeps beneath the doorframe, and settles into your blanket like an impatient ghost. It's warm, sharp, slightly sweet, and definitely chilly. You roll over, no use trying to sleep through that. Outside the village is still rubbing the sleep from its eyes. Cows shuffle to their morning stations. A rooster declares its importance from a precarious rooftop. and at the heart of it all, someone is frying something. You follow the scent to a roadside cart already surrounded by sleepy men with newspapers, students with combed wet hair, and one very determined elderly woman who looks like she could wrestle a demon with a spatula. On the griddle, poha with mustard seeds, onions, green chilies, and peanuts. And on the side, mirchi techa, a crushed chili paste that looks innocent until it kisses your tongue. You try a spoonful. Mistake. Delicious mistake. The woman watches you with a smirk. She knows. Mainstream historical fact, Maharashtra, the western central region of India, you're now wandering, embraced chili quickly after its arrival, incorporating it into local pickles, achar chutneys, and street foods. The paste form, like techa, became a staple side, especially in rural households, where it preserved flavor during times of scarcity. The mix of oil, salt, and thyme gave chili a new texture, no longer just a spice, but a companion, something to spoon onto rice, smear onto bread, or hoard like gossip. You wander through a spice market later, overwhelmed by colors. Crushed red chilies, yellow turmeric, black mustard seeds, deep brown cumin. It's less a market and more a pigment riot. A woman selling dried masala packets points to a jar and whispers conspiratorially, "This one burns twice." You nod solemnly and take one anyway. But while the chilies here dazzle and dare, they also disguise a deeper layer. Because not all chili stories are joyful. You meet a farmer named Ramesh in a village outside Nagpur. His fingers are scarred, his eyes weary. He grows chilies, specifically the famous Teja variety, known for its fierce heat and export demand. His fields stretch out behind him like a red tide, but his voice is quiet. He explains the labor sowing, weeding, plucking, drying, sorting. It's backbreaking. Profits are slim. Sometimes prices collapse. Sometimes pests ruin everything. And unlike big industrial farms, he doesn't have safety nets. He shows you a sack of chilies that took 3 months to harvest and dry. It weighs maybe 20 kilos. It might fetch enough to buy school books for his daughter if the buyer doesn't haggle him down. Fringe tidbit: some small-scale farmers in India coat their chili crops in ash garlic water or cow urine as natural pesticides. Not for flavor, just survival. It's old knowledge. Desperate knowledge. Historians still argue whether colonial-era land policies exacerbated the gap between spice producers and profits, especially when demand spiked in Europe and local farmers saw little gain. Some say it began with the Portuguese monopolies. Others blame later British export quotas. You step away from the farm feeling heavier, because even the most celebrated ingredients come with invisible costs. Later, at a temple courtyard shaded by neem trees, you join a small community lunch. Volunteers serve you from steel buckets, dal rice spiced okra, and a single green chili set gently on top like punctuation. You ask if it's for decoration. The server grins. Test of faith. You pass, barely. The sun climbs high, and you shelter in the shade of a stone veranda, fanning your face and sipping cha's, a yogurt-based drink that seems invented solely to rescue chili victims like yourself. A small boy beside you munches on bakarwadi, a spiral-shaped snack with just enough chili powder to be dangerous in the wrong hands. He offers you one. You hesitate. He nods solemnly. You bite. You regret. He laughs. The chili, you realize, is as much a rite of passage as a flavor. And as you drift through Maharashtra's towns and farmlands, it follows you like a fiery ghost inside banana leaf parcels hidden in lentil fritters, dancing on the edge of every meal. You find it in a roadside dhaba where truckers eat with calloused hands and iron stomachs. You find it in a grandmother's kitchen where dried chilies hang like trophies. You find it even in sweets, yes, sweets like chili-infused jaggery that start sweet and end with a wink of pain. It's not just a spice anymore. It's a character in the story, an unpredictable one. You meet a folk singer near the banks of the Godavari River. He plays a bowed instrument and sings about a man who mistook chili for divine punishment. Another verse warns travelers to never challenge a widow's pickle. The chorus, something about a demon who was defeated not with a sword, but with a particularly angry mirchi bhaji. You clap along, unsure whether to laugh or cry. And just when you think you've had enough, you arrive at a household celebrating a baby's naming ceremony. The rituals are unfamiliar, but the food is generous. A platter of rice, lentils, vegetables, and in the corner a reddish smear. You raise an eyebrow. Auntie leans in and says, "This one is made with ghost chili. Very blessed. Also very, how do you say, regretful." You nod, you eat, you survive. Barely. But here's the truth that settles in your bones as the sun sets over this spice-soaked world. Chili is not an invader anymore. It is not a mistake or a substitute for gold. It is gold. Fiery, fleeting, traded, worshipped, cursed, and craved. And as the stars come out and someone offers you a bowl of chili peanut brittle for dessert, you take it. Because this isn't just history. This is how fire learned to be flavor. You wake with a dry tongue and a newfound respect for capsaicin. Today, your path leads farther south across the rolling hills and coastal breezes of Kerala, where the air smells like coconut oil and cardamom, and the rhythm of daily life pulses to the tempo of the backwaters. But even here, amidst the lush greenery and the coiled rivers lined with rice paddies, the chili has made itself very much at home. You hitch a ride on a creaky houseboat, its bamboo hull groaning like an old aunt with sore knees. The pilot offers you banana chips, dusted in red powder. You ask what's in it. He shrugs and says, "Salt, chili, pride." Mainstream historical fact. Kerala's long-standing position as a spice hub, stretching back to the Roman Empire, made it one of the first regions to experiment with chili after the Portuguese introduced it. By the late 1600s, locals had begun cultivating it alongside native pepper vines, often combining both in fiery stews and fish curries that made colonial visitors weep in both awe and agony. You drift through canals sipping coconut water until you reach a small riverside village preparing for a harvest festival. Women in crisp white saris string garlands of marigold. Men haul bundles of plantains, and someone, always someone, is pounding a mortar full of chilies. They're making mean curry, a fish dish, with a sauce the color of molten rubies. The cook stirs it with the confidence of a sorcerer. You peek inside the pot. It hisses, you blink, your eyes sting. She grins. And so it goes, chili after chili, recipe after recipe, each with its own history, its own logic. You meet a retired Ayurvedic doctor who swears chili must be balanced with cooling foods or it throws the gut chakra into a tantrum. You're not sure what that means, but you accept the glass of buttermilk she presses into your hand like a healing charm. She explains, we don't eat chili for pain, we eat it to wake the body. Same as prayer. Fringe tidbit. There's a temple in Kerala where devotees offer chilies to the deity as a form of penance, hanging them in garlands or grinding them into pastes and placing them beside candles, not for curses, for cleansing. Fire, after all, burns impurities. Historians still argue whether chili entered Kerala through the Portuguese ports like Cochin, or whether Arab traders who had already adopted it from Africa brought it inland through smaller routes. Either way, the people didn't just adopt it, they absorbed it. At a roadside stall near Alappuzha, you try kappa and fish curry. The tapioca is mild, the curry is not. One bite and your scalp sweats in places you didn't know had glands. And that's when you realize this isn't just a love affair with spice. It's a balancing act. Everything here is about contrast, hot and cool, fire and sweetness, bright and mellow. You watch an elderly couple prepare dinner at their home. She fries dried red chilies in coconut oil for tempering. He grinds raw green chilies into coconut chutney for balance. Together their meal dances across your tongue like a well-rehearsed duet. Later that night you visit a Kathakali performance, the traditional theater of Kerala, with ornate makeup, elaborate hand gestures, and a musical score so hypnotic it might lull your soul out of your body. During intermission, someone hands you paham pori sweet banana fritters dusted with, yes, a hint of chili powder, just a touch. Enough to surprise, enough to say, don't get too comfortable, because that's what chili does here. It keeps you awake, honest, present. You learn of a village cooperative of women who grow heirloom chili varieties, including one with a peculiar curved stem known locally as Naga's tail. They dry them under thatched roofs, then roast them in small clay ovens before grinding them into pastes stored in repurposed pickle jars. One woman lets you taste a red chili paste so potent it should have its own mythology. When you ask what it's called, she says hope. And then she laughs like someone who's watched many brave tourists crumble. The ocean is never far in Kerala, and somehow chili manages to sneak into everything spicy, mango pickles, wrapped in banana leaves, shrimp cooked in fiery tamarind broth, even snacks like maruku spiked with chili and cumin that shatter like coral in your mouth. You ask yourself, was the chili always meant to be here? Because it doesn't feel foreign anymore. You visit a coastal church built by Portuguese missionaries. The bell tower looms like a lighthouse. And beside the church, in a small patch of sunlit garden, someone has planted chilies. Green ones, dozens, swaying slightly in the breeze like they own the place. You smile. A child nearby offers you a lollipop dipped in chili powder. You hesitate. She says it helps with the ants. You accept. She's not wrong. As the sun sets, casting a golden shimmer on the canals, you sit by a fire with a family who insists you stay for dinner. They offer you rice thorn fish curry and a bowl of mango pachadi, sweet, sour, spicy, confusing. You ask what's in it. They list 20 things. You nod as if that helps. And you eat, and you sweat, and you thank them profusely because that's what you do when something breaks your mouth and your heart at the same time. That night, under a mosquito net, you stare at the ceiling and think of all the hands that touched that chili. Before it touched your tongue, the farmer, the trader, the cook, the mother, the child, each one adding something invisible, each one saying, "This is ours now. This fire, it belongs here." You're still sweating from last night's curry when you find yourself aboard a coastal freighter headed toward the ancient port of Surat. The sea air is briny and sharp, cutting through the lingering embers on your tongue. You're following the chili's trail northwest now toward Gujarat, a land where sweet, salty, spicy, and sour don't just coexist. They throw a party together. A party Surat once buzzed as a major hub in the spice trade, long before airports and zip codes, when ships were patched with tar and traders swore by stars. This was the place where Portuguese merchants docked their ships heavy with cargo, hoping to peddle the exotic heat they'd picked up across the oceans. Mainstream historical fact, by the mid-16th century, Surat had become one of the most important entrepôts for trade between Europe and the Indian subcontinent. Portuguese traders, having snatched chili peppers from their American voyage, now offloaded them among silk's ivory and sacks of tamarind. Local merchants took them inland with the same curiosity they once reserved for cinnamon or nutmeg. On shore, you're met with a heat that feels more like a negotiation than an assault. It curls up your nostrils from food stalls tucked between temples and clock towers. You try a sev tamita new shock, a tomato curry laced with crispy chickpea noodles and a solid handful of chopped green chilies. It's sweet, it's sour, it's volcanic, and yet you take another bite. A vendor explains Gujarat is where chili met sugar and decided they didn't have to fight. He's not wrong. Here, chili dances across sweets and snacks alike. You sample masala puri farsan and khandvi, each wrapped in a spice profile that tiptoes between delight and disbelief. One auntie hands you a piece of gathia the size of a baby's arm and says, "Don't worry, it's only medium dangerous." Fringe tidbit. There's an entire Gujarati folk tale about a ghost who is afraid of chili powder. The solution, sprinkle it on your doorstep to ward off spirits. One 17th century manuscript even suggests that powdered chili mixed with mustard oil banishes envy from household shadows, which is poetic, and also maybe just smart pest control. Historians still argue whether the Gujarati palate became sweet spicy out of regional taste or trade necessity. Sugar was abundant here, and preservation mattered especially in desert areas where climate and shelf life went hand in hand. Blending chili with jaggery cane sugar wasn't just delicious, it made sense. You're invited into a family kitchen during lunch prep. 4 generations packed into one room, each doing something kneading, grinding, yelling. A great-grandmother sits cross-legged near the stove, stirring a cauldron of undiyu, the famed winter stew. She doesn't look up as she says, "If it doesn't sting the tip of your ear, it's not ready." You laugh. She doesn't. So you wait for the sting. And it comes. They teach you how to pickle chilies, fresh green ones, slit lengthwise, stuffed with mustard seed, turmeric, and fennel, then left in the sun like holy relics. One jar has been aging since the year you were born. They open it for you. The aroma is transcendent, like citrus and fire and ancient arguments. A teenage boy offers you a chili on a stick snack. You accept, forgetting everything you've learned about self-preservation. It crunches like lightning. You cough, he bows solemnly. You are now one of us. You drift through a spice market where the air is so dense with chili powder, you wonder if OSHA would allow this. There are sacks of dried red chilies stacked like sandbags, labeled not by name but by personality. Fierce, chatty, slow burn regret. You buy a handful labeled polite but firm and immediately regret underestimating them. But Gujarat's true chili legacy may not lie in its food. It may live in its ingenuity. You hear tales of women using chili as both a cooking ingredient and a social signal. Want to ward off gossip. Dry chilies in odd numbers on your windowsill. Need to tell your neighbor to mind their business. Leave a chili garland at their gate. 5 for warning, 7 for final notice. At a temple in a dusty village outside Bhuj, you witness a small ritual, chilies and lemons strung together and hung above a shrine to avert the evil eye. You ask if it works. The priest says if it didn't, we wouldn't still be doing it. Later, in a tiny town outside Vadodara, you meet a woman who runs a chili cooperative. She walks you through rows of red-streaked fields and says, "We name our chilies like children." One is called Jwala Flame, another Gori, the pale one, and there's Lalpari, the red fairy, which is apparently the deadliest of them all. She says this with the kind of affection that mothers reserve for their most mischievous offspring. You help her harvest for a while, plucking bright pods that pop from the stems like miniature fireworks. She tells you how the market works, how chili prices fluctuate with festivals, elections, rainfall. There's an entire economic microclimate here shaped by weather and taste. And in a final show of hospitality, she hands you a paper packet of ground chili and says, "Carry this when you travel. It keeps you honest." You pocket it like a charm. That night, sitting on the roof of a dusty guest house with a bowl of khichdi and chili oil, you reflect on all you've seen. The chili that once sailed in on foreign ships now sleeps in every kitchen. It's traded in sacks and smuggled in lunchboxes. It fuels festivals and flavors grief. It's sacred, profane, comforting, and challenging all at once. Here in Gujarat, chili isn't a foreign invader. It's family. Your journey pulls you west now, toward the Arabian Sea, where the city of Kochi, formerly Cochin, waits like a ice-slick harbor of memories. You arrive at dawn, the sky a soft yolk yellow, and step off the creaking boat into a place that has always been porous, a coastal sieve for centuries of flavors, languages, and misunderstandings. You're back where the Portuguese first landed in India in 1498, back where they believed pepper was black gold, and where they started to wonder if chili, this mysterious red newcomer, might be its equal or better. They weren't wrong, but they were, as usual, a little ahead of themselves and several leagues behind in understanding what they'd found. Mainstream historical fact. After Vasco da Gama's landing, the Portuguese established several trading outposts along the Malabar coast, including Kochi, and quickly integrated chili peppers into their spice exchanges. Unlike pepper, which had to be painstakingly imported from specific climactic zones, chili was generous. it grew like gossip, fast, invasive, and impossible to ignore. Kochi in the 16th century would have been loud with languages: Malayalam, Portuguese, Arabic, Hebrew, Tamil. You try to imagine that clamor now as you walk the lanes near Mattancherry Palace. The sea breeze carries the tang of fried curry leaves and mustard seeds. You stop at a roadside shack and try mean curry fish in a thin tamarind-laced gravy, brightened with ground chili that tastes somehow urgent. You ask how old the recipe is. The vendor shrugs and points to his grandmother's photograph on the wall. She's smiling, holding a chili in one hand and a rolling pin in the other. It's an icon. The locals here have a long memory. You sit with a retired history teacher who tells you without any prompting that chili was never a stranger here. It just arrived late to the party and immediately started DJing. Fringe tidbit. Some 17th century Malabar herbal texts describe chili not as a food, but as a talkative herb, an unusual phrasing that scholars argue may refer to its ability to provoke conversation or coughing fits. One translation reads, "It burns, it bites, it begs a drink." Historians still argue whether the rapid adoption of chili in coastal Kerala was due to its similarity to native black pepper or its resistance to crop diseases. Some say it filled in culinary gaps left by trade disruption. Others argue the flavor simply aligned with the local philosophy of food balance by opposition. Heat meets sour oil, meets acid, bitter meets salt. You walk through the Jewish quarter where faded synagogues whisper stories in cobalt tiles and cinnamon-laced air. You're shown a cookbook fragment written in Judeo-Malayalam detailing Sabbath stews spiced with coriander and chili. The manuscript is brittle and stained, someone clearly cooked beside it. A woman at the spice bazaar sells you a tiny pouch of Kanthari Mulaku bird's eye chili. She says it's best eaten raw on a dare. You decline politely. She laughs, then throws one into her mouth with the casual air of a queen declaring war. Later, under the banyan tree in Fort Kochi, you're invited to a lunch cooked in banana leaves, rice, coconut, thoron sambar, and a dazzling red thiyal that tastes like a sunburn in soup form. Your mouth tingles, your ears ring. You cry discreetly. Someone pats your back and says, "Good. Now you understand." But the story here isn't just about food, it's about power. The Portuguese and later the Dutch realized that controlling the chili trade wasn't possible. It was too adaptable, too democratic. Farmers could grow it in backyard plots. Housewives dried it on rooftops. Even pirates could barter it at port. You're told of a chili smuggler, a fisherwoman who hid sacks of dried chilies under heaps of fish to avoid colonial taxation. Her nickname was the Red Widow, and local legend says she could negotiate better than any governor. Some believe her descendants still run spice stalls near the ferry docks. You visit a spice warehouse now converted into a museum. Among the pepper grinders and cinnamon bales is a small exhibit on chili. One label reads, "Imported by accident, adopted by instinct." Another simply says, "Chili, the colonized that colonized back." You find that hard to argue with. A school group walks by and their teacher explains in a sing-song voice how chili changed the tongue of India. You pause. It's true. The landscape of taste across this subcontinent would look completely different if that small, unassuming berry hadn't stowed away in Portuguese ships. As the sun begins to lean westward, you join a family for evening chaya tea poured from glorious, absurd heights. They serve it with banana fritters and inexplicably a dish of chili jam. You raise your brow. They explain it's both condiment and curse breaker. We serve it to guests we like, and to those we don't. You laugh cautiously. Your hosts are generous with stories. One uncle swears that his great-grandfather cured malaria with chili powder and goat milk. A cousin nods solemnly. It didn't work, but he tried. Even now the boundaries blur medicine, magic, mischief. Chili slips between categories like a ghost with very loud shoes. You take one last walk through the dockside markets where fishermen still barter spice for rope and old women sell pastes from brass bowls. The smell of dried fish and red pepper hangs thick in the air, pungent and oddly nostalgic. You're told once again that Chile was never foreign. It was fate. It just needed the right weather, the right mouths, and a little time to burn its way in. And in this land of backwaters and brine of ancient temples and electric flavor, Chile didn't just arrive. It conquered quietly. By now your stomach has accepted its fate. There will be more chili. There's always more chili. But tonight, under a velvet sky dotted with monsoon-fed stars, your journey swings toward a different sort of conquest. Welcome to the Andean Echo. No, you haven't been transported back to South America, though it may feel that way. Instead, you're in the hilly provinces of northeast India, where chili grows not just as crop, but as identity. You're here to meet the Bhut Jolokia, the ghost pepper, the one that made headlines, the one that broke records, the one that made strong men cry and weak men lie about it. But first, dinner. You're seated cross-legged in a modest bamboo home in Nagaland. Smoke from a wood stove curls lazily toward the thatched ceiling. A host family serves you smoked pork with fermented bamboo shoots, sticky rice, and of course a side of ghost pepper chutney. You try to be brave. You regret it instantly. Your tongue stages a mutiny. Your brain considers escape. The matriarch, smiling with only half her teeth, nods in approval and pushes the bowl closer. You begin to see God, and she's laughing. Mainstream historical fact: the Bhut Jolokia, native to northeast India, held the Guinness World Record for the world's hottest chili from 2007 to 2011, clocking in at over 1 million Scoville heat units. Unlike the chilies the Portuguese brought, this one evolved in place, wild, fierce, and unapologetically intense. You sip rice beer. It does not help. You chew on a raw cucumber. It helps less. Eventually the heat subsides, leaving behind a sense of euphoria and a feeling not unlike surviving a minor car accident. You're told this chili isn't just a dare, it's a defender. Villagers rub ghost pepper on fences to keep elephants out of their crops. It works, mostly. Fringe tidbit: in 2015, Indian defense scientists began developing chili-based non-lethal weapons using Bhut Jolokia hand grenades designed to incapacitate enemies without killing them. Field tests were memorable. Historians still argue whether Bhut Jolokia should be classified as a domestic chili or a wild botanical with culinary applications. Its gene lineage crosses several capsicum species, defying neat categorization. Some argue it was tamed by indigenous horticulture. Others insist it was only ever politely tolerated. You learn that in these hills, chili is more than a spice. It's a rite of passage. One elder tells you how boys aren't considered ready until they can eat a raw boot without crying. You ask if he passed. He grins and holds up a watering eye. I cried once. Then I married her. You laugh, then cough again. In a quiet village, clearing, a group of children are playing a game involving dried chilies, pebbles, and an alarming amount of shouting. You don't understand the rules, but it's clear that laughter increases with proximity to ghost pepper powder. Later, you visit a farmer who cultivates heirloom chili varieties passed down for generations. He shows you the difference between Boot Jolokia and its milder cousins, pod shape, seed count, skin thickness. He cradles the peppers like sacred relics. You believe him when he says each has its own spirit. He tells you that in certain local beliefs, chilies ward off evil, hung in bunches outside homes, carried in pouches, burned in rituals. One wedding, you hear about used chili garlands instead of flowers to keep the in-laws honest. At a roadside market, a woman sells chili pickles in jars labeled with scrawled warnings, not for tourists, and death sauce number 3. You buy 2 jars. You consider writing your will. As you hike further through the region, terraced fields reveal rows of fiery red chilies drying under the sun like warning flags from nature itself. The air smells sharp and alive. You help an elderly woman sort fresh peppers into baskets. She tells you completely seriously that ghost peppers are excellent for romance. If you eat it together and no one runs away, you will never be apart. You quietly decide not to test that theory. The night ends in a village where a chili eating contest is just starting. Men line up with small bowls. Women cheer or cackle from the sidelines, and a local drummer pounds out a rhythm with chaotic glee. You stay far back. Your stomach begs. The winner is a wiry teenager with tears pouring down his cheeks and a grin stretched across his face. When handed a prize of dried fish and a new machete, he simply nods and says, "More next year." You applaud silently from behind a tree. As you lie down that night in a small bamboo guest hut, wrapped in thick wool blankets and the lingering sensation of combustion, you reflect on the strange dual life of chili. It was brought here and it was born here. It was feared and worshipped. It burned bridges and built empires. And in the quiet corners of northeast India, where the mountains keep old stories close and the forests whisper their own secrets, chili has never been just food. It's a test. It's a talisman. It's a love letter written in heat. You wake with the memory of fire still flickering in your mouth. A rooster calls outside, possibly the same one from the Salter recipes, now moonlighting in a remote Indian village. You stretch groans softly and make peace with your intestines. It's going to be another chilly day. But this time you're heading west. Across dry plains and tangled roads, past fields of millet and heaps of drying cow dung shaped like thick pancakes. You arrive in Gujarat land of spice merchant salt pans and one very dramatic Portuguese miscalculation. Because, dear traveler, this is where the confusion reached peak embarrassment. Let's rewind just a moment. When Vasco da Gama first landed in Calicut in 1498, he was looking for gold and Christians as per his royal orders. What he found instead was one spice markets filled with things he couldn't pronounce, and two, a whole bunch of people who had absolutely no interest in becoming Christian. Not a great start. Now, mainstream historical fact, the Portuguese, upon encountering chili peppers in India, mistakenly identified them as a type of Indian black pepper, pimenta de reino, or pepper of the kingdom. They were so eager to monopolize pepper, the original black gold, that they didn't bother to figure out that this fiery little pod wasn't even related. Spoiler alert, chili is capsicum, while true pepper is piper nigrum, botanically distant cousins. But in 1499, taxonomy was more of a vibe situation. You're sitting now in a dusty town square in Gujarat watching a local cook prepare mirchi bhaji, fat green chili peppers stuffed with spicy mashed potatoes, dunked in chickpea batter and fried until blistered. You bite into one, it's delicious. And slightly deceitful, because after 3 seconds of buttery calm, your mouth lights up like a Portuguese map room after someone spills ink on Goa. Next to you, an old man chuckles and offers a glass of Shah's spiced buttermilk. You accept, grateful for the truce offering. He tells you stories of the spice routes passed down from his grandfather, who swore the Portuguese once tried to pay for a bullock cart of chilies using Venetian glass beads. Fringe tidbit: in the early 1500s, Portuguese captains sometimes paid local Indian merchants in colored beads, cheap textiles, or even old coins from Lisbon, anything shiny enough to barter before the empire got around to minting proper currency for its eastern colonies. Historians still argue whether this misidentification of chili as pepper was an honest botanical mistake or a convenient branding decision to preserve the illusion that Portugal had achieved its black pepper dreams. Either way, the name stuck, and pimenta became shorthand for fire ambition and commercial spin. You walk through a crowded spice bazaar, weaving between mounds of turmeric, dried chilies, and cloves stacked like ancient treasure. The vendors shout in a half-dozen languages, from Gujarati to Konkani, to that universal tone of buy now or be sorry forever. A woman sells lal mirch red chili powder in silk-wrapped bundles, each marked with a small saffron dot for good luck. She points to a tinier pouch and whispers, "This one is for in-laws." You raise an eyebrow. She does not explain. You pass a mural showing Vasco da Gama's landing rendered in faded paint, and the kind of perspective that would make Da Vinci cry. Beneath it is a slogan, "Chili, the real gold." You suspect irony. At a roadside dhaba, you're served Sev Tamata Nushak, a sweet spicy tomato curry with green chilies, mustard seeds, and crunchy fried gram flour noodles. It tastes like someone weaponized comfort. You start to sweat. Again, the cook leans over the counter. "Portuguese mistake, eh?" You nod. "Best mistake ever," he says, and hands you a tissue. Later that day, you sit with a historian under a neem tree near an old Portuguese-built fort. He tells you about the chili's role in culinary diplomacy, how its adoption into Indian cuisine didn't come from royal command, but from farmers, street cooks, and mothers-in-law experimenting in village kitchens. He reads aloud a 17th century Portuguese merchant's journal translated into English. In it, the trader laments that every stew now burns the tongue and wonders whether the locals have cursed his pot. You both laugh. You suspect the pot was fine. As you sip tamarind water to cool down, you start noticing something chilly has become invisible. It's so deeply embedded in Indian food that no one questions it anymore. It's the bass note, the background heat, the quiet scream in your samosa. You visit a community kitchen that feeds pilgrims. Giant vats of dal bubble over firewood. Volunteers toss in handfuls of cumin, coriander, turmeric, and always chili. It's muscle memory now, no measuring, just intuition and inherited flame. One elderly woman tells you she adds a piece of jaggery to balance the burn. Otherwise, she says, your soul leaves before your body finishes eating. You sit by the ghats at sunset, watching the sun dip below the horizon, its reflection glinting on the river like melted copper. A child nearby eats a raw green chili with the same casual defiance you once reserved for bubblegum dares. You smile, then flinch in shared sympathy. Here in Gujarat, the chili's story comes full circle. What started as a mistaken identity has become an unshakable truth. The Portuguese wanted gold, they got red, and in doing so, they helped rewrite a continent's cuisine without even realizing it. It wasn't conquest, it wasn't conversion, it wasn't even colonization, not exactly. It was adoption, absorption, and maybe, just maybe, poetic justice. You wake in the final dawn of your chili-scorched voyage to the sound of clanging temple bells, distant rooster squawks, and the faint aroma of something being fried in oil that's definitely seen too many yesterdays. But you're unbothered. You've survived Butchalokia, mislabeled trade goods, colonial overreach, and the gentle mockery of grandmothers who can eat raw peppers without blinking. Today it's time to go home, but not before one last taste. You sit in a modest guest house in Goa, its tiled roof glowing in the early sun, the air thick with bougainvillea and history. Outside, the waves slap gently against old Portuguese sea walls, and the breeze carries the scent of salt and cinnamon. Your host brings out breakfast poe, bread soft and puffy, served with a pork vindaloo that was once part of a Portuguese sailor's homesick request. It's rich red vinegary and, of course, fiery. You chew thoughtfully, realizing that every bite is a whisper of how something foreign became familiar. Mainstream historical fact: Vindaloo began as carne de viña d'alhos, meat marinated in wine and garlic, brought by Portuguese sailors and missionaries. In Goa, it morphed over generations, adopting local ingredients like chili tamarind and Indian spices. Now it's unrecognizable from its original form and unmistakably Goan. Your host pours you a sweet-spiced tea. You ask how long his family has lived here. He laughs since before Vasco wore shoes. And with that, you begin to understand the story of Chile isn't linear. It's a spiral, a looping, fragrant, sometimes explosive trail through trade routes and temples, kitchens, and colonies. At every stop it changed and was changed in return. Fringe tidbit: Some old Goan Catholic families used to hold secret chili growing competitions in church backyards, smuggling seeds in hollow rosaries and betting on whose bush would bear fruit first. The winner got bragging rights and a second helping of sorpotel. Historians still argue whether the culinary fusion in Goa, especially dishes like zacuti and cafriol, should be credited to the Portuguese, the locals, or to centuries of adaptation through love, necessity, and fire. But maybe, just maybe, that argument misses the point, because chili never asked to be labeled. It simply grew. And the people who embraced it, whether for heat-healing power or profit, wove it into their world in ways no empire could predict. You wander through an old spice plantation tour later that morning. The guide points to pepper vines, cardamom bushes, and finally a row of red chili plants that look unassuming and lethal. He tells you they're descended from the first batch smuggled in from the Americas. The plants don't know that, of course. They just burn. By afternoon, your bags are packed. You've slipped a small bag of chili seeds into your satchel, a memento. A promise to try growing some despite your questionable balcony sunlight situation. The taxi driver who picks you up offers roasted cashews and points out historic forts, palm groves, and roadside shrines with painted eyes. The spice route, he says, gesturing out the window, wasn't just a line on a map. It was flavor, yes, but also story, mistake, revenge. You nod, you get it. At the airport, as your flight boards and the last wafts of curry fade behind the glass, you reflect on everything you've seen. Portugal didn't just discover Chile, it was undone by it just like the rest of us. And Chile, in its quiet way, conquered continents, not with armies, but with seeds. You smile a little scorched around the edges. You've been changed. And somewhere in some far-flung kitchen, a grandmother stirs a pot, throws in a handful of chopped red pods, and smiles to herself. She knows what she's doing, and now maybe so do you. So now as the heat in your memories cools and the journey quiets to a low simmer, you stretch out beneath your covers and let the rhythm of the night take over. Let the images drift, a chili drying in a sunbeam like a crimson candle. A nun pressing prayers into curds by moonlight. A sailor staring at a pepper like it holds secrets from El Dorado. Let it all melt together. Color, spice, laughter, confusion into something warm and oddly comforting. Let the echo of distant markets fade. The clang of church bells. The pop of oil in a pan. The dusty roads. The ghost pepper tears. Inhale slowly. The fire was never meant to hurt. It was meant to flavor. Exhale. You've wandered through gardens that once seemed exotic and learned they were just someone's backyard. You've tasted the past sometimes too deeply and found it sharp, rich, and alive. Let your thoughts soften now like bread dipped in stew. Let the stories curl around you like steam from a bowl long empty. Nothing more to prove, no more peppers to bite, just the quiet hush of your own breath, steady as a distant tide. Somewhere someone is still cooking, still remembering, still adding a little too much chili on purpose. And you're safe now. Warm home. Sweet dreams, traveler of time and spice. May your pillows stay cool, your thoughts stay mild, and your dreams never overcook.